Well, you're in high school and you actually hated magic in high school.
I sure did, yeah. I don't think Jerry Seinfeld has ever said this publicly, but he said it to me enough that I like to quote him. He says, all magic is, here's a quarter, now it's gone, you're an idiot, now it's back, you're an asshole, show's over. And there's this quality, people that get into magic very often are, sickly children. I mean, Teller got into magic in the hospital. I think that's also true for Copperfield. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing when someone's going to be laid up for a while to be able to work with their hands and read stuff and study stuff. And also, magic is used often as an icebreaker for people who are, consider themselves to be socially awkward, which of course is nearly everybody. And it often builds this wall with a little bit of resentment of I can do this and you can't, ha, ha, ha. And that always troubled me very much about magic, is it's one of the rare art forms that is exclusive rather than inclusive. When you're doing music, whether you are a cheerleader, like, hey, we all like to party, or whether you are an outsider, like Bob Dylan, of here's what I happen to be thinking, there's this feeling of opening one's heart and bringing the world in, whereas magic automatically builds a wall. I have this skill, you don't have it. And that always troubled me. I was also troubled very much by mentalists who claimed to have real powers. And I found out from reading books were lying, in my case, to children. I was 12 years old and very hurt by that. And I also, there's so much good about this. I grew up in a time, I'm 70 years old. I grew up in a time when there were variety shows on TV that the whole family watched together. So these shows were programmed so that there was always something somebody liked, but also something other people didn't like. So I would have to sit through some awful magician while I waited for The Who to come on, or Led Zeppelin, or one of those bands, And there's something beautiful about that. I mean, I don't want to, we've got to such narrowcasting now that it's kind of sad. It was great in, late 60s, early 70s radio. You would have, James Brown and Barbra Streisand, boom, boom, right on the same channel. The Beatles were there with the Temptations, and radio was just like, okay, you'll get your favorite song, but there's this other stuff you're going to hear too. And now that's all available. We have much more available, but with my children and so on, the channels are so seriously targeted that they pick what they want to sell to you when you go right down that channel. So I watched a lot of magicians that it just seems so weird that magicians would say, I had this dream, and their dream was always grotesquely misogynist. I'm going to cut a woman in half. That's your dream? We need to get you help right now. And then I met amazing Randi, James Randi, who was a skeptic and my mentor and my friend, who had the basic idea that you could, which not his idea, Houdini certainly had it, and many before him, but the idea that you could do magic while being completely honest. Randi referred to himself as the honest liar, and that we can have, it all comes down to, like so many things in life, it comes down to consent. If you say, I'd like to see a magic trick, you have given consent for me to break some rules that I would not break with you socially, And some magicians, many magicians, even today, want people to leave their presence believing things that they know themselves not to be true. And that to me is wrong. So Randi had this idea that you could be honest. And then Teller, I met Teller when I was very young. I was 17 when I met Teller, maybe 16. And he had this idea, which sounds like nonsense, that magic was essentially intellectual. That is to say that music, you can just kind of feel, Even poetry you can kind of feel. But magic, you have to think about what the reality should be and how what you just experienced deviates from that. So consequently, if you treat people with respect and kindness and don't say, ha ha, I can do this and you can't, if you are honest about when you were lying, and if you treat the intellectual elements of essentially with magic what you're playfully studying epistemology, right? How do we discover what's true? How do we get information? That fascinated me. So I'm one of the few people you'll find in magic that comes to magic at the age of 19 instead of the age of 12. And that's a big difference in the way you see an art form. The art forms you explore when 19 are very different than the art forms you explore at 12.